Running a campaign module is supposed to be quicker and much easier for dungeon masters. In this video, we discuss how I use them for my own games and how I think you should use them in yours. So let's get started. First of all, I want to say thank you to my patrons for their continued support. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do videos like this. They've contributed to the lights I use, the microphone, the camera, pretty much everything. The design of this room that was unfinished a year ago and now it's finished. All of that is thanks to my patrons. And also this. So because of you guys, I'm able to run modules. I'm able to use these for other games. I'm able to stream the games I am. Again, your support is amazing. So again, thank you. If you are currently looking to join a game, looking for RPG advice, or to just talk to like-minded gamers, or even get a closer connection to someone like me or, anybody else who's into this hobby, then I would like to recommend my Discord. You can find the link in the description below, and I highly recommend going over there, join it, get involved in the conversations. We love having new members. We're very welcoming and an open, inclusive community of like-minded gamers. So on my channel, you've probably seen it, I'm running a few campaign modules. I am running currently Tyranny of Dragons. I'm also running Descent into Avernus. Running a module has quite a few benefits, but it does have a little bit of a downside. Now I'm going to be basing a little bit of my thoughts on that based on the Wizards of the Coast product since 5e has come out. I'm not going to get into any other systems for this video. So before I get into my process and how I prep modules, I just want to quickly discuss some of my impressions and what my expectations are when I buy a module and if they're met. And this is going to be based on the fact that I've run quite a bit of the Tyranny of Dragons campaign a few times now. I've also cherry-picked things out of it for other games. I've done the same thing with the Princes of the Apocalypse. I ran a little bit of that. I have not played in that, but I have played in Out of the Abyss. So I have a little bit of an opinion on that. I have read the book. I've played Tomb of Annihilation a couple times. So I have a little bit of an opinion on a few different things. I own most of the modules except for Curse of Strahd. So again, I have a little bit of knowledge on this topic. And again, that's what all this is on. This is not based on what, Paizo does. This isn't based on what other companies do. This is strictly what Wizards of the Coast and 5e do and what my expectations are. Personally, I enjoy running my own games rather than modules. For me, most modules are for inspiration on story elements or encounters. And I find for me, this is what works best. But, obviously I like to pick and place some things like encounters or, enemies or whatever, and magic items and just place them into my games. When I plan on running a module, I expect that I should be able to run a game with far less prep than normally. But Wizards of the Coast, for me, does not go that extra mile with their modules. There's not enough read aloud text, in my opinion. I would love to be able to open a book to an encounter and run the encounter at the table. Even if I'm reading out of the book, that's fine with me. And I can't do that with most of their modules that I've run. And that to me definitely makes it not as useful as I think it should be, especially for newbies. If you have never run a game of D&D and you're looking to these for how to prepare your games, I don't think it goes far enough. And that's just my personal opinion. You might disagree. But what I want to say is there's still a lot of good stuff in these modules. It still cuts back on a lot of the prep that you would do. You don't have to worry about the story arc so much. You don't have to worry about weaving things in and out. It will take care of that. But again, the descriptive text of rooms and stuff, it just doesn't give you that. And so again, my tips are going to be based on this and how you would run a Wizards of the Coast module. So now onto the content I intended to deliver. This is how I prep Wizards of the Coast modules. So the very first thing I always try to do is I try to sit down and I watch my previous session. Now, this is something I know not everybody can do, but I would highly recommend if you can record your session, record the audio at least, Whether you do anything with that outside of for your own note taking, that's up to you. But for me, I've found recording my game sessions most of the time. There's a couple sessions I don't. Definitely lends itself to a better experience. And the reason is because I go back and I rewatch it and I catch things I miss all the time. I am not a good note taker while running a game. I'm just not. I'm too focused on what I'm listening to. I'm focused on my notes that I had from prep. It's hard for me to write notes and focus on all that at the same time. So I'm not a good note taker. So this is how I handle that. While watching it back, I take notes. Usually pick up on things that I missed. It doesn't only allow me to pick up on things I missed, but it also allows me to improve on things. Like if I notice I am not very good at something, it's something I can say, okay, I need to do this more. Or if I notice that I'm missing what certain characters say, I can make sure that I get that in there. The other thing is if I notice players were overshadowed or are having trouble getting a word in, in conversations with NPCs or something like that, I try to bring the focus next session on them and let them do more. Because again, we're humans, we're flawed. I miss things sometimes, and I think that's huge. So watching my previous session back, and that goes for anything, whether it's a module or not. I think watching a session back is great. The next thing I do is I read ahead in the module. Now, for example, I'm running Tyranny of Dragons. We're in the first part, and there's like 7 missions the characters can do overnight, right? So I've read all of those missions the first time before I started the campaign, but before a session, say they've done 1 and 2, I might read 3 and 4 thinking that they're going to hit those the next night. If it seems like they're going to hit 3, 4, and 5, I might read as far as all 7, but I will do this every single time. I'll read just a little bit ahead of what is planned in the session. This is something you can do in modules. This is not something you can do in your home games, but you can prepare those things, but it's going to be a lot more work. You got to prepare the story steps, things like that. So again, when doing the module, it's just about understanding enough so that you could improvise if you had to in those times. So while I'm reading ahead, I will jot down notes, descriptions for rooms, areas. Most of the time in Wizards of the Coast modules, you don't have read aloud text, and that is unfortunate. You'll get a block of text. Some of it you can't read to the players, so you kind of got to read through it and make a note like, okay, what's important in here for the players, and that should be in your prep notes to say to them. Maybe on the side you jot down the DM stuff, but basically prep your own read aloud text. Unfortunately, this is something I don't think you should have to do in a module, but you do, so that's just how it is. I also will try to find maps or pictures, whether it's in the module itself. One of the ways I do this is D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is an amazing resource, especially when running modules. You can literally right-click, save the map, pull it into your software, print it out, whatever you need to do. D&D Beyond is great. I highly recommend using it. Again, you can take a screenshot of the maps, or another thing is if, like in a lot of these modules, it doesn't have the maps, especially Tyranny of Dragons, you have no maps of any of the first encounters of any of those missions. So what you got to do is Google Maps, Pinterest. You can Pinterest search for D&D maps, things like that. I do that. I take the screenshot and then I'll use it. But while doing it, you kind of got to be careful if your description doesn't match it. So you can also, if you're doing a home game, you can draw it on your own flip mat, things like that. Gaming paper is a great resource for that as well. The other thing is if I notice something that I forgot to mention in a previous session or something that inspired me, I'm going to incorporate that into the notes for this session. I might say, oh crap, I forgot to give them that information. So over here, I'm going to find a way to insert it in an appropriate spot to give them the information I forgot to give them before. And I'll say, like, this part of the prep is really important to me because I am not someone who is comfortable going off script while running a game that is a module. I'm more than happy to do this in my own games. That's why I prefer that. But when it's a module, I worry that I'm going to mess something up that later on is going to be impacted, and I don't want to ruin something for later on. It's just a weird thing. I know I have the freedom to do whatever I want with the module, but for me, I just have a hard time going off script with modules. That is why I do the notes the way I do. That's why I'm a little bummed out about the read aloud text. You can see in a couple of the games that I've run before, whether it's Tyranny of Dragons or Descent into Avernus, you can see times when my notes weren't good enough, where I'm like, ooh, let me see, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, ooh, that was bad. Like, you can see it, and in both of those modules, there have been moments where I was not as well prepared as I should be. The next step is preparing the NPC and monster stat blocks and going over treasure that I might give the players, or that's already in the book about giving the players, whether it's gold, magic items, whatever. This step, again, D&D Beyond makes it so easy. If you're going through the module on D&D Beyond and you come across like kobolds, if it's a specific kobold or a cultist or whatever, you just click it, right click it, open it in a new tab. That's what I do. All the monsters and NPCs that I need stat blocks for are typically in the tabs at the top of my computer. I do use my laptop since most of my games are streamed online. And this is an easy way for me to just go, okay, what is the AC? Boop, 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 boop. But I do go a step further. I always will write down my stat blocks. So not the stat blocks, but some of the information about them. So if it's kobolds, I'll write the hit points. If I know there's 8 in the encounter, I'll do 8. And you're gonna see, I'm gonna put up the my notes on screen right now. But you're gonna see I do hit points, I do AC, and I write out the amount of monsters, and then that way when they hit different ones, I just cross it out, rewrite the number next to it, whatever they have left. The other thing that I try to always do is with the treasure, right? It's a magic item or whatever. I try to pull up that as well in a separate tab so that I can then later on add it into D&D Beyond or find it and assign it to the correct character. That is a big thing. I think this will make it easier for your players too if you're able to just assign it to them in D&D Beyond. It's another reason to just use D&D Beyond rather than have to read the stat block out to them, wait for them to take the notes. So D&D Beyond does make that a lot quicker. The next step is preparing maps, miniatures, and terrain. Now this is going to change and vary depending on if you're running online games, in-person games, theater of the mind, or miniatures, or Roll20. Like, it's just going to change depending on what you do. Now, I will admit my favorite way is in person, where I like to use miniatures, terrain, maps, props, all that stuff. And this is actually my favorite part of the prep. I love going and picking the miniatures that represent the monsters. I love going and putting out terrain. Now, I don't have a ton of terrain, but the terrain I do have, when I use it, I'm really excited to use it. If I don't have it, I will use a flip mat that is a really good representation if it's a home campaign. If it's not a home campaign, it's a module, typically I'll draw it out on a flip map or on gaming paper. Now for online games, you're going to look up maps. You're going to look up maybe tokens if you're doing Roll20, or Fantasy Grounds or whatever your virtual tabletop is of choice. I sometimes do that, but I tend to do Theater of the Mind online. And when I do it, I do pull up a map or a representation of a picture of a monster, but I don't worry about tokens and things like that. One of the things I'm trying to do better at is putting in environmental effects, traps, potential, creative uses of the terrain, and trying to explain that. And I'll sometimes go back and add to my descriptions if I'm adding these things at this point. Sometimes I have a really cool miniature I want to use that's of a trap or something, or a piece of terrain that incorporates a trap. And I'm like, ooh, I want to use that. It's perfect over here. And then I'll put that into my notes from the previous steps. So that's the step-by-step how I prep modules. But if you are still looking for gaming prep, whether you're a Dungeon Master, Game Master, or whatever, I want to recommend Brogan from No Nat 1's GM Prep Tips. He's got a top 10 list over there. It's really entertaining. I highly recommend going and subscribing to his channel and check out that video. Link right here. With that, modules are something I am still learning to be more comfortable running. And because of this, if you have any tips or advice, I would love to hear it in the comments below. It would be very helpful to me. And maybe it's something I can share with some of my viewers as well. So if you guys are watching this for the first time, be sure to smash that subscribe button, but also go down in the comments and read what others have said. It'll be very helpful to you, hopefully. I love modules for inspiration in my own games, but think they could be better if you want to run them as written. They need more read aloud text and even some suggestive text or ideas added in, more especially if you are a new DM. I think there's a long way to go if you really want to help new DMs, and I think that's important. Modules, in my opinion, should, for the most part, be pick up and play. Obviously, this can't be a blanket statement across the board because, again, you're going to have very situational things. Your players are going to sometimes go off script. So I understand why they leave it a little more open, but it would be nice if they still gave you some suggestions and things throughout them with kind of like a beginner's perspective, assuming the reader is a beginner. So if this is your first time here, be sure to smash that subscribe button, hammer that like button, and leave a comment below with your tips. Just like I said, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you found this video helpful, just reach out, let me know. This is Master the Game. I am Juice. Game on.